I don't think it's my day today, babes. Just sat down to re-record the whole video. Sounds like some tree surgeons just down the road chainsawing a tree. Not even joking. Seiko fans were up in arms when the beloved SKX Diver was finally discontinued a couple of years back. All versions were among the highest regarded entry-level tool watches, with an iconic aesthetic and rock-solid performance that consistently made them an easy recommendation for those new to the watch collecting hobby. Unannounced, this horological legend was pulled from production, only to quickly be replaced by a near-identical clone with worse water performance and a higher MSRP. The reception to this move was mixed to say the least. Many were quick to praise the upgraded movement and the increase in available colours, whilst others ridiculed the SRPD as an overpriced and underspec'd cash grab, essentially claiming that this new Seiko 5 was a worse watch for the money. As the brand recently pulled a similar stunt with their field watch lineup, I figured I'd take a look myself to see if this new release is better or potentially worse value for money than its predecessors. Here we have the classic SNK805 and SNZG09, which are probably nearing the end of their run, as well as the newcomer, the SRPG33. I've opted for all of these in green to keep the comparison as fair as possible. Shop kindly sent me the two older models, whilst Amazon covered the cost of the newer version. You'll find them all affiliate linked in the video description for your convenience. At the time of recording, the SNK805 is typically available from around £70 to £100. The SNZG09 can be had for around £100, whilst the SRPG is hovering at around £200. You'll notice that's quite the price jump, so how do they stack up? Let's get into it. All three watches come in typical entry-level boxes. If anything, that provided with the previous generation models feels more substantial, though both options do suffice. All it is a box after all. When side by side, you can see why I selected these three. It's almost like the three tiers of Pokemon evolution, as they look like different members of the same family, which I guess they are. The 37mm SNK is the smallest, with the 42mm SNZG being the largest, and the 39.5mm SRPG fitting snugly between the two. I'll let you be the judge on which ones would be most viable for your wrist size. For context, the SNK fits me the best, followed by the SRPG, which I can probably just about get away with, though it is a little floaty for reasons I'll mention later. As expected, all are constructed of the same 316L stainless steel, and for the most part, the cases look quite similar, with comparably toned blasted finishes across each. The two legacy models exhibit more of a matte finish than the newer 5, which is marginally more reflective when under direct light. I'd say the two largest pieces are also the most alike, with a near identical appearance, just executed on a different scale. In terms of precision, I think both of these are about equal, and their edges are each a touch more defined than those on the SNK, which for the most part still remains in the same ballpark. There are a few notable differences, some of which constitute advantages for the refresh. The first being the inner lug area, which is fully blasted to match the remainder of the case, unlike the cheaply polished equivalent on the older models. This upgrade extends to the rear as well, where a very nice blasted case back resides in place of the glossy areas present on the other two. These alterations certainly give a more consistent look, though won't be particularly noticeable during wear, unless you happen to have a transparent wrist. All still look utilitarian in their own right. Crowns are a feature that you likely will notice. All three are standard push-pull crowns, so no screwing about here. My favourite is the recessed crown on the SNK805, which tucks away neatly to form the most symmetrical aesthetic of the bunch. This implementation was a staple of the Seiko 5 ranges of years past, which we're seeing a bit less frequently these days. Those fitted to the SNZG and SRPG are much more standard, with the smaller SRPG surprisingly being the larger of the two. Both are acceptable, though it would be interesting to see if swapping them improved the looks of either. Drilled lugs are a welcome addition to the new SRPG, allowing you to change straps or bracelets more conveniently than before. It certainly makes the life of a wristwatch YouTuber significantly easier. The least expensive offering, rather unsurprisingly, also offers the worst aquatic performance, with an assigned 3-bar splashproof designation that could be considered the Achilles heel of an everyday durable field watch. I mentioned this when reviewing the black version, the SNK809, and while not the end of the world, it's still somewhat frustrating, even at the low price. The remaining offerings each boast an ample 10-bar water resistance, so are better suited to being submerged for long durations, should that be necessary. This means you can wear them swimming without a concern of water penetrating the innards, so long as the crowns are fully compressed. That added versatility could make those a more tempting proposition for your intended use case. Under the hood, the 7S series movements in the legacy models come up against their successor, the 4R36 in the new watch. For the most part, the latter is the same as the others, but is equipped with more jewels, a hacking lever, and a hand-winding bridge, unlocking those additional capabilities. This means you don't need to rely on the infamous Seiko shake to recharge an idle movement, and you'll be able to make more precise time adjustments too. While these are undoubted boons, to me neither are game-changing, and in most situations, you'll notice little difference in performance between the two lines, despite this arguably being the SRPG's flagship feature. Both will provide reliable performance and are a better value proposition than the dirt-cheap quartz tickers powering some comparably priced alternatives. Both operate at the same 21,600 beats per hour, so not the smoothest, but they get the job done. Disappointingly, the increased price has not correlated with an improved crystal, as the new SRPG yet again only houses Hardlex glass, which is essentially a harder mineral crystal that's functionally identical to the pieces fitted to the SNK and SNZG. All units appear to manage reflections evenly, and the same can be said when it comes to scratch resistance. To me, it's borderline unacceptable that a £200 plus watch doesn't have sapphire crystal as standard in 2021, especially considering the styling and the specifications offered by numerous other brands. At the very least, it is domed and does look more premium than the flat glass on the other two, but it's a shame nonetheless. The recent Seiko 5 releases have received widespread acclaim for their updated and modernized designs. While I think many outlets have completely overhyped these new models to stay in Seiko's good books, I do think this is a sleek watch regardless. It most closely resembles the SNZG, with a very similar layout that includes much of the same typography, but forgoes the raised minute track in favour of a more traditional flat chapter ring. While the colour scheme across all three watches is fundamentally identical, the more expensive watch does have some more premium touches, including some subtle dial texturing and applied markers rather than inked ones. The brushing atop these is replicated on the hands, which otherwise mimic those present on the SNZG in both size and profile. Of course, there's also the replacement of the original shield for the newer printed 5 series icon. I'll let you decide which of those two you prefer. The SRPG certainly looks more expensive, primarily due to all the applied bits, but I'm not sure it's necessarily better looking than its predecessors. This khaki colorway looks a little dull and bland when paired with the brushed numbers. They do have a nice gleam at certain angles, but when square on in dimmer environments, legibility does suffer significantly. In retrospect, I prefer the look of some of the alternative colours, which tend to provide higher contrast and consequently clearer visuals that I think are more pleasing, though that may not have been such a fair test. The SNZG is essentially a more restrained version of the SRPG, with white trimmings and more scripting, including the additional sports branding, jewel count, and water resistance text. Despite the added writing, it's probably more readable overall, though I'm not sure what to think about the slightly darker tone used on the outer ring. It gives the watch added depth and presence, but it's just a bit jarring at first. I'm a big fan of the pilot field watch hybrid that is the SNK805. It's quirky and retro in all the right ways, and has some unique flair, despite lacking some of the finishing touches due to the fully printed dial. I particularly like the handset and the loom pips at the circumference, but I imagine this one is more divisive than the other two. I can see how someone could write this one off as just looking too dated for them. Let me know what you think of the look in the comments below. Night performance is good across the board, with each staying illuminated for a similar amount of time in dark conditions. Due to the thicker and longer markers, the older SNZG is hands down the clearest of the bunch, whilst the other two are stuck battling for second. There isn't much separating the straps either, as they all feel of reasonable quality for budget watches. If I had to choose, I'd say that the two-piece nylon fitted to the lowest cost watch actually feels like it'll last the best, with its dual layered construction and reinforced holes, though it does tend to catch on long sleeve clothing. Personally, due to my skinny wrist, I prefer these two-piece straps that don't pass underneath the case, as they avoid adding unnecessary bulk, though for most people, the new Seiko 5 is probably just about slim enough to make the NATO that it ships with viable. If I were to rock this one properly, I'd still have to switch it, as it does increase the thickness, making the watch wear more like a 41mm equivalent. While I'm not a fan of how these G10 straps work, aesthetically, it looks the best out of the three, and provides a smooth look with no gaps at the lugs. I don't think this is by accident either. You see, I think all of the recent Seiko 5s have been crafted in a particular way for a very specific reason. Everything from the increased reflectivity of the case and numbers, to the domed crystal and blasted rear, it all feels like it's there to look more premium in online marketing imagery. Perhaps it finally dawned on Seiko that attractive product shots might convert better than pixelated messes taken on a potato. Due to the additional care and attention, the SRPG33 does look like the most expensive out of these three, as it should do considering it's double the cost of the older alternatives. When you have all three in your hands, it doesn't feel like there should be quite such a divergence in cost. Currently, you're paying about 100% more for a watch that feels about 30% better. Therefore, while not a worse watch physically, I do think it is worse value than its forerunners, and at £200, it's a little overpriced in my books. The older 5 models provide you with a cheaper way of getting roughly the same experience with very few sacrifices, provided that you can pick them up at decent prices as they are currently on Germanshop. Remember, never pay scalper prices. All options are linked below. If you enjoyed, you know what to do. I'll see you next time.